Rapier here. This is actually interesting. As we were getting mic'd up, we were just chit-chatting all over the place about some of the mental health aspects of the world. And Blake is actually our resident MD, represents ALX Medical. Blake, you've been in the medical world for 20 plus years, is to my understanding what we're talking about. And just for our listeners, this is a little bit different of a show than what we're typically used to. Obviously, we are a sales structured, business structured kind of podcast, though we do cover everything in between. I love having you as a guest because I feel, in specific, the generation of individuals that work within our industry, it's a relevant topic. Mental health, it's a relevant topic. Addiction, it's a relevant topic. How guys are getting through this and progressing in their lives. It's a relevant topic. So talk to me about kind of what you've seen in this younger generation, their exposure to mental health and what they're dealing with.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I think we should actually kind of split it in pre-COVID, post-COVID, to be honest with you.
Interesting. Okay.
I think the reason we've seen such an uptick, and I'll explain this because this is actually scientific. So there's a document or a volume of research called the DSM-4 or 5 now, which is basically like the psychiatric Bible. In that it qualifies us as human beings as biopsychosocial spiritual beings, right? So we're physical, we're mental and emotional, we're social, meaning relationship driven, and we're spiritual, which means human beings are hardwired to believe, period. Any kind of recorded history at any point, they believed in something higher, right? So we are hardwired to believe. So that's why that volume of research says that we're biopsychosocial spiritual beings. If we go back to the pandemic, we shut down 3 of the 4 things that make us for a long time. And not only did we shut it down, but we used fear to do it.
That's interesting.
Right? So then what happened? Someone that may be hovering at a 4 and 5 at an acuity scale for mental health is now a 10. Right? So what I experienced in like real life stuff is in our medical detox that we do pre-COVID, 75 to 80% of the detoxes that I were doing were opiate-based, heroin, fentanyl, that type of thing. Post-COVID, we just did the numbers. 87% of the detoxes I'm doing are alcohol.
Wow.
Right?
That's crazy.
So that shows you it's socially acceptable to drink, right? But then it's just gotten out of hand, right? And so I think we can say, oh, there's better education. There's more people struggling with mental health, period. There just is. After COVID, we recognize we just added gas to a fire. Now let's go back to my acuity scale of 1 to 10 on an emotional state. When we look at an individual, my business partner and I, we kind of deal with the 8, 9s, and 10s, right? So we deal with the like severe.
Okay.
9s and 10s are probably the ones that are in our treatment centers, right? Suicidal, addicted, not functioning, not taking care of their activities of daily living, that type of thing. And so those are the kind of people that are in with the doctors and the therapists and that type of stuff. One of the, and that patient population has increased probably 5-fold,
Wow.
right? Prior to COVID, in my general practice, just a general family practice, I would say less than 20% were mental health. Now it's about 67%.
Wow.
Of the patients I see day in and day out.
That's crazy.
And so, Blake, I'm trying to connect the dots in my head, and I'm trying to understand. So, is it the solitude? Is it people being confined to their spaces? Is it the lack of social, communication with other people? What is the cause of this uptick? So you mentioned pre and post COVID.
Right.
Maybe unpack that a little bit for me. You'd mentioned that before it was opioids and other kind of hard drugs. Now it's alcohol. Alcohol being socially acceptable. You're just saying that people with the amount of time that they had by themselves just found the bottle a little bit more, and it
Right.
kind of went down the rabbit hole with it.
Well, and that's what happens is people that struggle with alcohol have a tendency to isolate, right? And then not only were people like isolating just because of their personality structure and maybe some kind of undiagnosed mental health condition, but I have to work, I have to go out, I have to participate in the community, right? These are just normal things pre-COVID that we had to do. You take that same individual and then we go through a pandemic. Don't come to work, don't grocery shop, We'll DoorDash everything. And now
Brinley still does that every day.
Now, don't get me wrong. There's some good stuff. But one of the, my wife and I were on our morning run this morning. We were talking about a neighbor of ours. And that's what, he just kind of broke. And because he didn't leave his house for 18 months.
Wow.
He worked from home. He did all these things. So then we isolate. Well, then let's think about what was the third one, social. And we think, well, we've got social media, which, yes, we do. But social media for the brain is kind of like being a meat eater and living off tofu. Like, yeah, you can survive, but is it a steak?
Yeah.
Right?
That's a great
Does it
example.
satisfy? No. So it's good, and there's a place, but physical connection, physical in the same room, talking, visiting, working through conflict, these are all things that build in the brain. Now, when fear gets involved in that, and I'm scared to go out, I'm scared to have conversations, then more isolation. But then we find that we don't connect.
You know what's actually really funny thinking about what you're just saying, Blake, is I'm involved in social media every day with work and then my wife and her sisters, right?
Yep.
It's funny because behind a screen, it's so easy to be comfortable, right? And so going through the pandemic, you kind of see it is easier to show what you're doing or, hey, I am happy, but in reality, you might not be because on social media, it's your perfect, quote unquote, like perfect life, right? And so not being able to engage with people, I can see why that would really actually like hinder and really hurt your mental state, right? Because you lose that emotion and touch with making a connection face to face, physically, because dude, you get comfortable being behind a screen when you should be comfortable speaking like this.
There's certain skills that aren't inherent in us,
yeah,
right? So like being able to give people compliments face to face,
yep,
but also conflict resolution, right?
Yep.
Like something for our younger population. I watched. This is actually interesting. So I watched a family member with their spouse. And when they were with us, it was fine. They were like talking and everything like that. And then one of the spouses left, and all of a sudden it was like on the phone. And I finally was like, dude, what are you doing? He's like, I'm in an argument with my wife. And I was like, how did that start between now and when she left? And he's like, oh, it's been going on for 2 days. And I was like, wait, whoa. What do you mean you guys were fine? He goes, oh, and he said, we argue over text.
Yeah, we don't fight in public.
You know what I'm saying? And I was like, bro, you gotta sit down, look into the eyes, and like learn how to disagree civilly, right? And be
have
able
a conversation.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have hard conversations. So some of these building blocks that we've just learned throughout time got hindered and pushed down. And to be honest with you, some sources were like, that's bad.
Yeah.
If you do that, you're a bad person. While we go through this pandemic I remember standing in an airport with my mask on, and my brother-in-law and I were coming, it was through customs, and we're waiting for our bags, and he took his mask down and took a drink of water out of a water bottle and put it back up. And this guy lost his mind. And he started telling me he was a horrible person because he pulled his mask down. Yeah. He's screaming at him. And my brother-in-law was like, what just happened?
Yeah. Drink of
right?
water.
And then the guy stopped and he came over and he's like, hey, I'm sorry. I'm just super stressed out. And we forgot how to disagree. We forgot. I had a treatment center, another maybe side story. So I had a treatment center and we were talking about this principle and it was first responders. That's this particular treatment center. A lot of PTSD, and this guy raises his hand and he goes, yeah, I don't want to connect. I'm a police officer. Outside of my wife and my daughter, I hate everyone. And I was like, oh, dude. And he goes, so what do I do? So, not only just recognizing the problem, but what are some things that we can do? So we talked about that, and I said, well, why do you hate everyone? Oh, everybody's idiots, and everybody's breaking the law, and everybody's dishonest, and he kept saying everyone, and I was like, I'm not dishonest. And he goes, oh, yeah, you are.
Wow.
But he had isolated for so long that he had created this dialogue in his mind.
And it was absolute.
And it was negative and angry.
Yeah.
And so finally he kind of realized it, and he was like, how do I get around it? And so we talked about how in human beings, and we see this on social media, right? So bridging the gap. So one of our defense mechanisms as a human being is when we feel vulnerable or scared, we create a group. And it's normal and it's natural and we should, right? So we find like-minded people and then we're part of this safe group. We do it in addiction all the time. The NA, AA, right? We do it in religion. We do it in sports. We do all sorts of stuff. So especially when a human being feels vulnerable, scared, weak, they associate with like-minded people to feel safe.
Interesting.
And that's totally healthy. Now, when that group will fulfill a need, what happens though, unfortunately, human nature is, well, if one's good, eight's better, right? So then that group starts to feel stronger. And instead of being inclusive and helpful, they start to create an us versus you mentality.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
That's interesting.
And we see that on social media all the time. So now my group, it's not just fulfilling a need to help me feel safe, but now my group is like, well, we're better than you are, other group, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
And he sat there for a minute. And so I explained that principle and he goes, oh my gosh, you're right. And I said, to point that out, who are you closest to in this treatment center? And he pointed to this guy. And he goes, why are you close to him? And he goes, well, because we go on a walk every day. And I turned to the guy because I knew the history. And I said, if you're comfortable sharing this, how many times have you been to prison or jail? He goes, 6 times. And the police officer goes, what?
Wow.
You never mentioned that. And I said, but wait a minute. You're in 2 different groups. You can't like him, right?
Yeah.
You can't be safe with him. So what we talked about is how do we get there? I call it knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe moments, right? I call it, okay, step out of your group. And I'm going to be honest with you. Whenever I've had a knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe moment with someone, I found value in them. I've never not liked someone I try to have a knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe moment with. I try to get to know them, right? And that fulfills a social thing. It helps me to not isolate. And more importantly, it breaks up a lot of fear and anger, distrust, and judgment that I created on my own or in my group.
So Blake, this resonates with me big time. We are social creatures. We feel the need to be around one another, to make relationships with one another, to do things for one another.
Service.
It's service, right? It literally makes the world go round. And I'm not going to be long-winded with this, but back on the social media, nowadays, looking at your screen, communicating through text, people have lost the true art of face-to-face communication. In our world, we preach it constantly, that the deals are done face-to-face, even still to this day. We've got guys that go out and knock doors and sell 1 million different products. They are doing this face-to-face. Business deals still being done face-to-face. Partnerships being created face-to-face. But this is a lost art with the younger generation. And maybe, in a way, and again, I'm not the doctor, but maybe it speaks a bit to how we're gaining or getting to this mental health crisis. People hiding behind their computers, people hiding behind their phones, and not necessarily engaging in these relationship opportunities that we're literally on earth to have and create and enjoy.
Yeah. 100%.
And so, maybe there is this depression of, I'm a social media guy. I don't really have a lot of physical contact or a little bit, or more friends or friends in general that I can have these experiences with. Add in this COVID situation where everybody was in their house for a year, maybe just magnified it. Bringing this back home, my question to you then is this, Blake. When I was younger, the mindset was, if you're depressed or you're sad, you rub some dirt on it and get over it, like get out to the playground and keep playing, like keep doing your thing, right? But that has very much so drastically evolved.
And you have to be careful, like, to even say anything like that these days.
Now that's a thing, right? So people, and again, I don't want to say that people are sensitive. I don't want to call people overly emotional. I mean, that's where we are. We are an evolving species, right? Like we're not the same as we were 20 years ago even.
Yeah. Right.
So, is it more that this mental health addiction type of, emphasis that you see, is it more relevant or more alive today than it was when I was younger? Or is it just more spoken about due to social media and outlets like that make it easier to know what's going on in your home versus mine and versus his and everybody else's?
Well, I think we've created a community where it's safer.
Okay, so
right?
safer to speak about.
And once again, that safety is false because it's on a screen, right? We watch people that have had deep-seated beliefs or whatnot, and they feel okay like posting about it, but you go to talk to them about it, and they're like, oh, I don't want to talk about it.
Yep.
I don't want to talk about it.
Yep.
But I can sit in a dark room and post about it, and which is really funny to me because you're like, so you'll let 3 million people look at it, but you won't talk to me who's a healthcare professional.
It's interesting, huh?
Right? But that's what
So
the brain
true.
does.
Yeah.
So there's a whole nother layer. Yeah, we've talked about the pandemic and other things, but social media and the internet, it's brought a level of I'm connecting when I'm not, right?
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
that's and that happens, and we see that. And I have 5 sons, and it's really interesting to me because they have social media and we text all the time and it's there, but we have like a weekly like one-on-one, right? It's a knee to knee.
Necessary.
And so I'll sit with them and so I don't know if I do think it's safer because the platforms are now safer because you can just unfollow someone or you can block, right? You go to your school class, this would be really interesting, and you say, okay, you have a sensitive topic that you've been abuse, you've had a traumatic, you have PTSD, I'll spew it all over the internet, but then you go to a religious group or school or your team, will you get up at practice and say, hey guys, I've been going through something?
Probably
No.
not. Yeah, probably
Right?
not.
And so,
Which is funny because they want we want the reassurance on
that you're okay.
On social media or on the internet and not like
Face to face.
face to face, which is so interesting because I would feel so much better, and I'm sure I do it too, I'm sure, but like I would feel so much better if you guys were speaking to me and saying like, dude, I support you, I get what you're going through, instead of trying to read through comments of people I have no clue who they are. Which is just so funny that the mind thinks that way these days. It's crazy.
I tend to. I'm sorry, Blake.
No, please.
I tend to agree with you, Donnie, and I think I think it's a double-edged sword, right? I think where I have trust in the two of you, and I can speak openly. Blake, assuming that I can speak openly with you guys. At the same time, I don't want your opinion of me to be tarnished.
Yeah,
if I've got
For
things
sure.
in the skeletons in the closet, I don't
yeah.
want you to know that.
Yeah.
I'm actually way more cool with a total stranger knowing that, giving me their feedback, because I can block them or eliminate them from my life with zero consequence.
Well, and I think that's why in our social environment, our social structure, it's super important to have people that we trust and value, because at the end of the day, what doesn't help a mental health deficit is a yes man.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so but that's what we want on social media.
Yeah.
We want the likes, we want the
Comments,
hearts, we want the good for yous, we want the, right? And then we block everybody else. Whereas a parent or a sibling or a best friend may go, hey, I validate you, I see you, that is hard. I think that you're thinking weird, like I think your thinking's off. Let's talk about it this way. Because we don't want that either, right? Because part of mental health is our little discrepancies, our little roadblocks, our little deficits we become comfortable with. And when we finally get the courage to say, hey, I think this way, we don't necessarily want someone to change that, especially initially.
Yeah.
I don't have a drinking problem, right? I have 3 beers. Okay, well, just so you're aware, as an addiction specialist, I double and triple whatever number you tell me. But that's okay.
Wow.
It's safe. And then they go, okay, maybe I have a 6-pack. Right? And they do more and more that as they start to test the waters, and I go, okay, cool. I've seen that. That's normal. I've seen that progression before. A lot of people do that. Oh, then it's more. And then it's more.
You start
and
to
then it's
feel
more.
safe.
Right. Now, the problem is sometimes we do that and someone is judgmental and so we get scared. Because now I'm in this weird, I'm sitting here and we're having this conversation and it's awkward because I've been vulnerable and you tell me I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm saying we need to open up more and we need to have one-on-one experiences, but we also need to be careful and we need to go to people that we have some trust and continuity with. And that's why someone will open up to a therapist more than they will a spouse at first. Because if the ugly, and that's bridging what you just said. I'm much better with someone else telling me their idea that I don't really know and I don't really care about than my spouse.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So go to a therapist.
Yeah.
Go to a doctor. Go to someone that goes, yeah, I've seen that before, and test the waters. And that's a needed total experience. I'm not quite ready to do that with someone that I see every single day.
Yeah.
Right? So these are little benchmark things that we can do. In your world, understanding this principle is, if I'm doing sales or if I'm doing a business deal or if I'm doing these other things and the person on the other side of the couch or desk or door is responding weird, it's easy to kind of get in your head and be like, oh, I'm not doing this, or they're a jerk, or no, right? I have people all the time come in hot. And what they're looking for is a mirrored approach. So when I come in hot, that person's going to get hot back. And then when I don't, they kind of like stop. And they're like, wait, why? Like I'm insulting you, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, right?
Yeah.
And when you don't mirror their intensity and that kind of stuff. And the reason I bring that up is because I've been in plenty of business deals and other things where I'm trying to read the other party, right?
Of course.
And I'm going, oh, no, they're not having it. They're not this, they're not. But then I have to stop and say, don't let my insecurities and project on you.
Yeah.
Because they have their own life. So what do? Tell me about your family. Because guess what? I have kids. Yeah, I've got kids. Okay, I love my kids. You love your kids? Yeah, I love my kids, right? I love my spouse. I had a dad that I looked up to and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, me too. And we have that common ground.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we're building a relationship and that type of thing. And so for me, anytime I'm in a situation where I'm like, this isn't going well, I'll find something common. That's a knee-to-knee, toe-to-toe moment, right?
Love that.
Because guess what? Everybody loves their kids.
Yeah.
Right?
It's phenomenal advice. I think what you're speaking to more than anything is that safety, right?
Right.
Trying to find a safety net between individuals, and sometimes that can happen quicker rather than a super long, drawn out relationship. Sometimes it can happen quickly, but sometimes it takes a long time to crack that egg. Therapists could be, of note, or family members, anybody that can provide that for you. But Blake, here's my question. We have to close here in a couple minutes,
Sure.
but I think, and I'm just thinking about people that I know in my life from my past and, in the present, I know a lot of individuals that struggle with addiction. I know that a lot of them use social media as an outlet to describe their feelings, if they're depressed, if they're happy, if they're making it that day, if they're not making it that day. But what I notice is it is a constant cycle, one that they are not, social media is not curing it. The outlets that they are utilizing right now, it is not curing it. And I know that there are a lot of individuals that are listening right now that are wondering, like legitimately wondering, because the reason they reach out on social media or the reason they have small side conversations is because in their mind, they're trying to reach out the best they know how.
Their cry for help.
It is, in whatever way that is. It might not resonate with you, might not see it that way, but it's happening.
Sure.
What would your advice be to an individual right now who's listening, thinking like, all right, what is my legit next step, man?
So this is what I would do. We talked about that biopsychosocial spiritual, right? So
Yes.
physical, mental, emotional, connection, higher power, belief. I would set a goal every single day in each one of those areas, right? Now, let me teach you something that's really important about setting goals. So small goals are sustainable goals, right? So we need to understand that time, there's a reason that in addiction people will talk about their time and sobriety, because time is immensely powerful. So time is either immensely powerful to our detriment or it's immensely powerful to make us bigger and stronger, right? So I would encourage the person suffering with addiction to utilize the power of time. Small goals are sustainable goals, and then be patient enough to let time make them powerful, right? So a physical goal to say, I'm going to run a marathon in 3 days is stupid.
Yep.
But you can walk 30 minutes a day.
Yep.
And that's very sustainable. And then by the time you've done that, it works, right? I like to memorize. So one of my psychological things that I do every day is I memorize. Now, you could say I memorize for 2 to 3 minutes every day. That's not that big a deal. But I have memorized for 2 to 3 minutes a day for 25 years.
Wow.
Right?
Yep.
So that's very sustainable. It takes 2 to 3 minutes a day.
And becomes powerful.
And it becomes powerful.
Yep.
So now
right?
if you can say everything you've memorized in 25 years, you can start now.
Yeah, right. You don't have enough time, right? So in those areas, connection, right? Okay, I'm going to call my mom every day, right? I'm gonna talk to my coworker every day. Right? And so make them small goals that are sustainable, and then be patient enough to let time make them powerful. But do all 4 areas every single day. Do something in all 4 areas every single day, and addiction areas of the brain actually heal. We know that. We've published that before.
That's awesome.
Right? So that's what I would tell you. And then as you do that, some of those things for the mental, maybe it is a therapy at one point. Maybe it is seeing an addiction doc. Maybe it is coming out and saying, okay, this is where I'm actually at. And you'll notice that time you get stronger to be able to have those conversations and do those things.
Blake, that is as true a thing as I've ever heard. That resonates. I love that. I hope that it impacts. I know it'll impact our listeners. This is Blake Rapier, LAX Medical, here with us, gracing us with his time. It's been awesome. I wish we had more time. We had a short one to get
Thanks
in
for having
today.
me.
But ALX Medical, you can find Blake, and sure was a pleasure.